In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Lord God, Almighty Father, Creator of mankind and author of peace, as we are ever mindful of the cost paid for the liberty we possess, we ask you to bless the members of our armed forces. Give them courage, hope, and strength. May they ever experience your firm support, gentle love, and compassionate healing. Be their power and protector, leading them from darkness to light. To you be all glory, honor, and praise, now and forever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below, where are the dead? Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from falling hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high, if ye break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep till poppies grow in Flanders field.
Welcome to Monarchist Minute, royalist news and discussion out of the good old US of A. I am Charles York. Joining me tonight, we have Kaiser Bob, the Czar Commando, Darth Kilhoun, Victor Smith, and William Stout. This episode is being recorded on Friday the 11th, which of course is Armistice Day, or as we call it here in the United States, Remembrance Day.
Veterans Day.
Veterans Day. Sorry, Veterans Day. Really?
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
we call it Veterans Day here. You're thinking of England.
I'm thinking of England. Sorry. Oh boy, what a great way to do the intro. Yes, Veterans Day. And we're going to be spending the first segment of this show, talking. Well, I guess World War One, and I guess our country's military in general, and other countries' militaries, and the nature of war and all that. And I guess I'll chuck it over to Darth, who has probably the most appropriate insight on this, given that he's, as far as I'm aware, the only active service member. Well, certainly the only active service member on this panel, but the only one in the server as well. I don't know. Well, I'll let Darth talk about it.
We have someone that is at a military college. That's all I'll say.
Okay. Well, Darth's the only one here, so.
I mean, I'm just gonna say this too about people in like military colleges. It's like, unless you were prior enlisted before you went there, it's like, yeah, you still haven't actually experienced the true army yet. I mean, you've learned a lot of stuff about the army, but you haven't actually touched a day in it yet. But I digress. So the First World War, what's to really say about it besides that it was the total slaughter of the best generation of men to have honestly ever walked this earth, at least comparatively to our day. I'm sure there was greater men at previous times, but after having studied so much about the war, like say reading The Storm of Steel, which is kind of like a common trope, but also reading like Cops 125 and other memoirs about the First World War, I honestly say that most soldiers today can barely comprehend even a day in the trenches, let alone an entire war of 4 years. And it required a higher caliber of men, greater than men that are produced today, that in that it It brings me to tears to even think about the slaughter of the many great youths of that time. An entire generation wasted for petty bourgeois and capital interest. And the fact that great men like Wilhelm II and Blessed Karl of Austria tried to bring peace to the war all throughout its process and were denied, typically by London banking houses and Wall Street financiers. It's just sad to me. Sad that an entire generation had to die. And we remember them on Armistice Day, even though it didn't really even resolve that conflict. It just made a bunch of resentful, bitter men in Central Europe that wanted to regain their national honor in the Second World War.
And I think that was, well, the Treaty of Versailles, which, shall we say, punished Germany for for World War One. It sort of created the conditions for the Weimar Republic as we knew it, which created the conditions for a, shall we say, strongman like Hitler to have taken the reins and done his tyrannical worst to different groups of people that he blamed for not only the loss of World War One, excuse me, but also the people that have been marginalized by certain other people in society, even until today. Think about what Kanye West and Kyrie Irving have said very recently.
Let's not
But
touch that right now.
yeah, I mean, everybody also goes to Germany because they were kind of the last man standing in World War One, and they oftentimes forget though, like honestly the rest of Europe, like Hungary, which was an integral member of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which you kind of have to view the Austro-Hungarian Empire not as one empire. It had one ruler, but it had two nations. It had the Austrian nation and the Hungarian nation. Um, and like the Hungarians were just as, I mean, the reason why they sided with Germany in the Second World War was a lot of it was because of honestly the same revanchist vision, like the same vision of regaining their honor as a nation after they had literally half their land stripped from them and given to all these other nations that bordered them. And they were stripped of even the ability to have a, like they were pretty much given worse conditions than Germany actually in their treaty. Like they weren't allowed to raise any new regiments besides that what was allowed in the treaty. They they fell under a communist revolution and actually had a communist government for a time, and effectively the Allies hamstrung the Hungarian army's ability to actually crush the communist government in Hungary. That's why it took like a year to overthrow. Um, and then also Austria, that was Blessed Karl of Austria. He attempted to, let's just say, redefine the empire and make peace with the Entente Cordiale. But they essentially were silent to him, and actually the Allies supported Social Democrats to take over and corrupt the Austrian nation and, let's just say, desacralize the Austrian nation from its holy place in history. So there was just a lot of animosity, and it was caused a lot by the private interests in London and New York, that were directing the war and directing the
And,
funding and equipping of it.
and of course, We talk a lot. Sometimes some people bring up how Germany kind of sort of forced the US into the war, but honestly, I don't think that's fair. Primarily because it overlooks a lot of the pressure that Britain put on the US to get America to join into the war. For
Yeah,
example, during the early half of the war, Britain used the Navy to threaten American trade interests with Germany. By 1916, 99.8% of all trade with Germany was basically blocked off by Britain. And quite frankly, Wilson let it happen, which
and
no self respecting US president prior would have done. But
there's oh, sorry.
we gotta think. We talk about unrestricted submarine warfare, but that was at a similar, if not greater, capacity than unrestricted submarine warfare ever was to disrupting U.S. shipping.
And
Mhm.
there's also the argument because the Germans before the sinking at the Lusitania, tried to put ads in the newspaper saying that yeah, don't travel on British shipping. We are going to torpedo it, and everyone's like, and I think the U.S. government tried to get those ads out of the papers. And the cynical amongst certain people would argue that that was done intentionally just to get Americans killed. And if we can say remember the Lusitania, I'm not saying, and and it's there's one thing, a war in in legitimate cause, but the tragedy of World War One is not only were all these interests, I guess, fueling it, because I mean people like to say it was the first modern war. I guess you could say the Civil War is more the first modern war, but I guess it was the first modern war on this scale, whatever you define modern war as. But also the fact of how preventable it seemed to be with the whole July crisis, and how there was every opportunity for de-escalation, but one way or another the various uh, monarchs were almost forced into actions, and there was all this miscommunication, like when Kaiser Wilhelm meant a blank check, the Austrians interpreted that more in a way that they weren't supposed to. The Austrian
It,
government did, and then
it wasn't even like the Austrian government; it was more the Austrian General Staff, which Emperor Franz Josef ordered them to stand down the army, but they ignored it, um, and they continued to march on Serbia. So you can't even really say that because I mean
Honest,
there's just a few generals who instigated the war. Also, a bunch of Austrian ministers interrupted Emperor Franz Josef's telegrams and communications between him and Berlin too. So and edited a lot of his statements to Wilhelm II. Um,
honest,
so it was a lot of it's a lot of government ministerial positions, a lot of generals, a lot of bankers, a lot of private interests that pretty much forced the war, while then the actual leaders themselves were essentially they weren't even leading at that point because they were being subverted by their own men essentially.
honestly, I truly think World War One was Europe's punishment for the sins of the Victorian era. The greed, the violence, the using a force of arms to basically strong arm people into getting what they wanted, all culminated in World War One. And I honestly believe that, yeah, World War One was the direct consequence of the sins of the Victorian era.
well, I never.
Now, we should congratulate and praise the efforts of the ones that tried to keep peace in Europe, especially the Kaiser and the Tsar and Blessed Karl. It seems that the greed, like in London, even from probably France and the United States, instigated the war even more, as well as the just the governments of certain nations in World War One that seemed like they wanted the war to happen for their own interests.
Well, I mean, there. I mean, I don't know, the tragedy, you can't really necessarily pinpoint a single cause. Like the British were getting upset that the Germans dared to try to build a navy, even though Germany realistically couldn't have equaled the British because of but the but all these different factors, and it's Germany and Britain. Germany, I think it was 1912, or it was before that, when they offered the British essentially terms that, okay, we will stop uh our naval armament, our naval rearmament, or not rearmament, but our expanding of our fleet, if we can get an alliance. And Britain, for you know some reason, said no.
But
It's mm, I
not
mean,
just to put all blame on Britain, there also was a lot of issues with Kaiser Wilhelm II wanting to turn Germany into a colonial power, which, quite frankly, Germany had no need nor real reason to do so,
well,
as
Kaiser,
Bismarck said.
well,
Kaiser was very ambitious in his time and really wanted to get on the same scale as the British Empire. But
One
seems
does
that
not simply get on the same scale as the British Empire, especially at that point of history.
well,
um,
no, I mean, in defense of Wilhelm II, there, I don't. Germany wanting colonial interest. Firstly, having colonial interest is, I guess, prestigious, but also the fact that, colonies do generate wealth for the home country, and there's also the fact of the
um,
civilizing, mission. Although how much civilizing Lutherans can do remains to be seen.
well,
But anyways,
could we could actually look at the Kaiser's views on both the German Empire at home and the German Empire abroad. His idea of an empire was much more economically prosperous than what the British and French were doing. He wanted to develop the colonies as well as one of the main conflicts that began his rivalry with Bismarck was him wanting to use negotiations with his populace more than brute force, like what happened in the Victorian era.
yeah. I haven't read too much into Kaiser Wilhelm's life, but I do know that, if history says that someone like Kaiser Wilhelm II, or if historians say someone like Kaiser Wilhelm II, was completely incompetent and never had a good idea and is responsible for all the world's problems, and you should if you ever see someone like him, you should kick him and punch him and slash his tires. uh that's probably a lie. uh
Yeah.
you know
Um,
c-
well,
s-
we could take a look here at the most Western views I can find on both the world wars. World War I was not Germany's fault. It was surprisingly to my history teachers' learning. Kaiser tried ending the war before it started, but why would a Western teacher want to talk about that? Um, it's like Wilhelm had a difficult life in his time. He was mistreated, and the one person he could look up to the most was Queen Victoria. Um, and because he was partly disabled, he was not seen as that much of a use of an heir to the German throne. But then his predecessor died unexpectedly, and there he was on the German throne. He wanted to try something different, the German Empire, other than the Victorian style that was so used to everyone, to the aristocracy of Germany. Like I said before, he tried using negotiations with his workforce more than Victorian era brute force. He wanted to develop the colonies, and he wanted prestige, and he was very ambitious in his ideals, which is probably in my eyes, one of the main reasons why he developed a rivalry with the British imperial interests.
And there's a big thing where I remember reading in the documentary, or seeing in the documentary, I guess I should say, that Kaiser Wilhelm had a personal issue with the British, not for any major reason other than the fact that since it was a British doctor that was responsible for his disability, he blamed the British for
Yeah,
his
I
own
read about that.
shortcomings.
Um,
But that's
I
just
also,
what I read.
yeah, I read that too. I also find very fascinating about the beginning or the preceding events to the Great War is how begin in like the 20th century of how Victorian era styles of government were being moved from the European continent very quickly. Um, but it just seems like beginning like 1905 began basically the destruction of the Russian Empire even before the war even started. British Empire wanted British for being British. French wanted more influence. They wanted Alsace-Lorraine back, and also seemed like Austria-Hungary. I don't know if this is true or not. This is just a historical theory I read, not from really like any official document that I could find. Is that Austria-Hungary wanted to annex Serbia? I don't know if that's
I
true or
don't.
not. If any of you have any context, that'd be great.
I just want to add in for the Serbia part. They weren't going to annex Serbia. They want to add it as like a puppet state, but not add it into their
To add it as
multicultural
a
emperor.
they wanted to add it as a constituent nation to the dual monarchy and make it a tri monarchy, I believe.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's fun.
Well, I mean, I mean, with the whole Victorian thing and how Victorian institutions were falling apart, I finished Great Expectations. So if anyone is actually bothering to keep up with the book club idea, I did get that book done. And now I'm reading Hard Times, and without spoiling too much of it, one of the characters named Stephen is a laborer in one of the other main characters' factories. Um, and yeah, that whole Victorian.
Okay, just a correction on Serbia. No, they didn't want to annex nor make Serbia a third crown. They wanted to make either Croatia or Czechia the third crown. Well, actually, Bohemia would be the name, but either Bohemia or Czech or Croatia, because those were already member territories in the Habsburg monarchy. And they would just make it like a third Slavic kingdom. So it's either the southern Slavs and the Croatians or the northern Slavs and the Czechs.
Now, you could also see World War One and its preceding events as the beginning of basically a conflict that will will continue in the Second World War and interwar period in both Asia, Balkans, and the Middle East. The Ottoman Empire was crumbling, and the Japanese were just starting to build an empire. And after the 1905 win, it just seems like they were going to continue their ambition to the interwar period, and probably why they joined the Entente to try and take the German colonies. And like the Ottoman Empire, I would say that the British would have wanted to take as much as possible of the Ottomans, expand their influence. That British stuff they like doing.
And
I mean,
let's
also like Japan was also a complex situation because the only reason why they had a modern navy was because they literally acquired and bought a lot of their warships from the British Royal Navy and a lot of the designs they got from them. Like if you compare British naval design to Japanese naval design, they're virtually identical up until the 1930s, where then the Japanese started to develop their own newer designs.
Yeah. You look at the Congo class battle cruisers at the beginning. Well, the first one, the Congo was built in Britain. The other three were built in Japan. But they look, I mean, they look, I mean, Japanese by the end of their lives because of the pagoda mass. But I think I remember like seeing the Congo in our early configuration and thought, wow, that's British.
But I
Yeah.
mean, the Japanese were very loyal allies. Like that's the thing about the Japanese is they understood loyalty was part of their epistemology. If you made
Still is.
if you made a pact with somebody or a deal, you honored that deal up until death. That was
I would
just
disagree
part of
with
them.
you on that. I would say the Japanese were using the British to start building Asian Pacific Empire by the German colonies and annexing them. Eventually, the Japanese were going to basically make their deal with the British. It's like the
Well,
British
And
don't.
well, no, well,
and I just gotta say, Japan, if we go back into like the idealized samurai era of Japan that the Japanese Empire like to think of itself as, they were very, very prominent in backstabbing, especially during the Son Goku Jedi era.
Yes.
well, I mean, I don't. Well, the Japanese. I don't think that the Japanese, as far as I'm aware, all the Japanese plans for expansion into the South Pacific and against the European colonial holdings was after the Anglo-Japanese Treaty was forcefully brought to a conclusion because of the Washington Naval Treaty. And one of the terms that we got out of the treaty, us being the American, or we being the Americans, was that we essentially stopped a renewal of it. So we've essentially brought ourselves up to parity with the British in terms of capital ship numbers. But that would be useless if they were still allied with the Japanese, because obviously the Japanese also have their own fleet of capital ships. So essentially, any war involving the British would involve the Japanese and vice versa. So we essentially forced the treaty to not be renewed by the time that when it came up for renewal. And it's not like the Japanese could have said no, because they were spending like something like 20% of their GDP on the Navy, and that wasn't really sustainable. And even some of the Japanese officers knew that, and they were like, "Oh,
Even
yeah."
so, even if the treaty was renewed, I would still see the Japanese as backstabbing the British, even without American involvement. The British hold too much influence in Asia, and that also can sustain with the French.
Well,
That the British Raj, the British Malaya, Australia, and the British and French holdings inside the Asian continent was keeping the Japanese locked and the ambitions locked. And they wanted to expand and be an empire that rivaled the British and the French and Americans.
well,
Well,
I mean,
there was this ideology that came about post the British breaking of the Anglo-Japanese Pact. There was this ideology that came about within Japan that understood that essentially the global East had to become self-reliant because the Europeans were just going to exploit it, and they viewed themselves as exploited by Britain by dragging them into the First World War against Germany
Yeah.
and just being used as this petty power that the British could toss away at a moment's notice.
Well,
Um,
even without that ideology forming, perhaps it actually would have even formed with the renewal, because like Japan was
I mean, I don't
basically.
think it would have taken prominence in the Japanese officer corps, taken
Perhaps it
prominence
wouldn't
as
take
much in the Japanese
prominence.
officer corps if the British. I mean, it's just like it stuff like that does cause animosity. It does bring about factionalism with how to go forth in the future. And I mean, everything's so multifaceted, and it's very hard to like make a carte blanche explanation of history. Like, say we were talking about Wilhelm II earlier, and how it's the withered arm, it's the animosity from British doctor that failed to save Frederick III, yada yada. But honestly, most of that came out of Freudian psychology that try to psychologize history. And you can't really apply psychology to an entire nation. I mean, you can somewhat, but it's very hard because you still have to realize that there are many different facets that make up a nation. There's literally millions of people, and there's thousands of people within the state that defines the path of the nation.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting thought on history. I would actually agree with that. The imperial ambitions of nations is very hard to both predict as well as sum up, as you never know what a nation is going to do to quote unquote keep their survival inside the world.
Well, with Japan, I think without without the Japanese fear that the British, would eventually turn on them, the Japanese wouldn't necessarily have needed to go to war to take over the colonies, because remember what they wanted in Indonesia was the oil, was that sweet
Yes.
Sumatran oil, and the and all, and the other, and I guess rubber, or what was it, rubber, yeah, whatever,
Yeah,
and all the and all the places in the Orient, and also you need the Philippines, because even if the Philippines holds no resource value in of itself, while it's on the way, and the Americans, if they don't like you, can cut off your supply easily. But you know, if Britain was friendly with them, then you wouldn't really need the Dutch East to violently take over the Dutch East Indies. And the Japanese already had a sphere of influence in China, and that was working out pretty a-okay for them. I mean, um, they certainly
they
had their
eventually
sphere
won the
of influence
wars.
there. They
Eventually
basically
won the
ran
war.
Shanghai, if I'm not mistaken, or Tianjin. Sorry, Tianjin.
Um, well, they did eventually win the wars in China. Oh, most of the wars anyway. And the beginning wars, though, there was always going to be rebellion in China, and in the long term, that was going to be very costly for the Japanese. There's millions of people in China, and those people really didn't want one powers deciding what happened in their life that much, especially the fierce rebellion that happened in the World War II era and pre-World War II, as well as even the Boxer Rebellion.
Yeah, well, I mean,
mm, I
we have
mean,
to remember. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, this comes from direct testimony from Japanese officers after the invasion of the Republic of China. Um, that most of the time when they conquered a land, like they could rape their women, they could pillage their land, steal their food and stuff, but the average Chinese man was pretty docile, actually. The Chinese man just kind of saw it as essentially the passing of the wind. Like it was just another event in history, and they just are going along with it. That was typically the epistemology of the average Chinese man um, under occupation. Like, yes, there was a few radicals, there was a few people who went against that grain, but like the 95% of Chinese just kind of accepted that it was the new reality. And like there was a 5% that kind of created that narrative that that the Chinese didn't want to be under Japanese occupation, and they were very, let's just say, militant, and that's why they're recorded in the history books. But um, they were in the extreme minority
Yeah.
of Chinese people, which actually, if they would have been crushed, eventually, like Japanese rule over China would have probably just been accepted. I'm honestly saying that. Like that's
Well,
that's honestly like a lot of different peoples across the world. When a foreign invader comes, that just slowly, gradually accepts the new reality of who they're under. Like the Romana Gauls in France, well, it become France, like they accepted the German aristocracy that was put over them. Well, when the Franks, a German tribe, invaded and created France, and they made the Romana Gauls their bourgeois and peasant class, and well, the Germans became the aristocracy in France.
and I mean, even who was it? Thomas Jefferson, in our own Civil War or Revolution, said that like a third of the people were 30% of the people were
The
revolutionaries, 30% of the people.
revolution.
30% were loyalist, and 40% just didn't care and just wanted to be left alone. I think that in most conflicts, no one. I mean, so long as you aren't directly going after you or your family, and the food keeps coming in, you don't really care. Which we can say something about that one way or another, but I guess that's just the trend because it's not because total mobilization of every single man, woman, and child isn't really something that's ever happened.
It
Perhaps
only happens when there's a state that can direct that, and the state is typically the ones who, like, say, the Soviet Union. It's like the average. Let's just say the average Russian actually didn't care that the Germans were invading as much. Like, it's written in history books that they did, but there's a lot of let's just say compliance between the uh, the Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Baltic peoples with the Germans. So, and it was like the vast majority just didn't care that they were under German occupation during the war. And that's why that when the Soviets came back in and the Soviet state apparatus did mass purges of a lot of the people who complied, which was a lot of people that
Interesting.
Well, when you're when you're under communist rule for 2 decades or plus, be understandable to develop the attitude. Nothing could be worse than this. Which I mean,
Well, given that the Germans eventually started genociding the Slavs, I'm pretty sure they learned that there is something worse than communism.
The
well,
Soviets were
Things
genocidal.
can-
well.
No.
Here's what I'd say to that. Uh, for me, I'd be dead either way. I guess it's just my choice of which aesthetic I want to be murdered by. Do I want to be murdered by NKVD in practical but bland uniform, or Gestapo in snazzy uniform?
Okay, so I have a retort on that because there are records that actually, like, per capita, the average Ukrainian um had more chances of volunteering for the German armed forces than a American citizen volunteering for the armed forces in World War II.
So
Oh yeah,
as
there were. Sorry, I was going to say that there were large. Actually, I think every ethnicity of that the Germans had any territorial sway over had large volunteers, at least in the
Also,
beginning.
by the way, General Plan Ost was only a proposal, and actually Hitler dismissed it himself as what what's a better word for the R word, but it was dumb. He even said that himself. Like, it was proposed by some SS lackey, and it was given to Himmler. Himmler supported it, but Hitler was like, "No, this is dumb. We want to create client states out of these Eastern nations, not kill them all."
well, you see, with my
Hitler
family,
seems to be a character that it's surprising because it's weird when you think about other Nazis thinking someone absolutely insane.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
mean,
mean, Himmler was actually pretty rational, but he had his own version of rationality that other people thought is insane. Like, you can understand his methodology of mine, and it was very coherent, but it was people in the West try to say it was insane, but it wasn't. He wasn't mentally insane. He was very coherent in his beliefs. I'm not like pulling rear guard for the Nazis, but I'm just
yeah,
saying, like, calling everybody who you think is evil insane is just trying to psychologize your enemy when in fact they could actually be much smarter than you are.
but
yeah.
let's see.
It's Well, I mean, it's. I mean, you can be rational. You can have a ration. You can have rational thought. It's just that the assumptions that you're basing that rationale on may not be the best. It may be it may be completely self-sufficient. I can come up with a rationale that says 1 + 1 = 5, and it could be completely self-sufficient, but that doesn't mean that it's right. But I can.
I mean, that's kind of a straw man too, because, like, that's what Freudians try to use too. Like, Freudian psychology has kind of destroyed our understanding of the human mind. I would say, because Freud was let's just say off on a lot of things. if you understand that there's a collective unconsciousness in a nation, kind of like what Carl Jung observed, then you understand like why these phenomenologies, why all these people actually like tend to coabulate towards these beliefs that Freudians try to say are insane.
Well, I mean,
Um,
it's something. Well, I guess. I mean, I'm just. How do I put this? I'm just trying to say that that the logic may have been self-sustaining, but it just. I mean, it was wrong. It's like how any system of belief that isn't Catholicism may be self-sustaining, but in some aspect it's flawed.
What do you call it? So coming from like my family history of one of my family members about the Soviets and the Nazis. Um, we saw no difference other than the political spectrum of the Nazism and communism. They both genocided everyone. Both starved people. They both put people in terrible concentration camps, and they both were authoritarian dictatorships that cared not for their people. We like
mhm.
doesn't really matter. We would fight against the communists or the Nazis. The same thing to us anyway. It's like did
Well,
both
I mean, like here's kind of like a term that was developed. I mean, like the Soviet Union, it is the dictatorship of the proletariat. Well, then in National Socialist Germany, it was the dictatorship of the proletarians. That was kind of like a term that came out because they're both fundamentally fourth estate ideologies where it's the masses that sway the nation. It's just either national or it's international socialism.
Yeah.
It's
and
I
Hitler
think
had
that
a lot in common when it came to treating people of their country. Like Stalin and Hitler, some tried to do good for their people. You would some people say that. Well, obviously they didn't. Like, they targeted certain groups more than others, and in Hitler's case, there was Jewish people and even Christian people. Then in Stalin's case, it was anyone that was anti-communism or Trotskyist or literally was communist even.
Well,
Like, it's the political spectrums of these countries so similar in how they deal with people. It's like, is there really any difference other than actual ideology itself?
no. I mean, I mean, National Socialism, and I'm sure Darth agrees or not, but from what I have been told by well, one specific YouTuber, Teg, who seems to be a great a normal guy except for his weird libertarianism. But the thing is that National Socialism evolved out of German socialism because originally socialism wasn't this international workers of the world unite sort of thing. Originally, I think the original socialists were very local and that like the town would be the state that controls everything inside the town. But then once Britain kind of showed, hey guys, like it's kind of cool, we can get resources from over here and then bring them over here, and then we can make cool stuff that we never were able to make before. Then like international socialism became a thing, and then the Germans invented a more national socialism. Of course there was a National Socialist Party in Bohemia, no relation, that kind of emphasized the like the state, like the particular area, either the nation or in the Germans' cases the ethnicity.
Well, are we going to define a difference between National Socialism and fascism proper,
Yes.
or
Yes,
okay?
because well here's the definition of fascism that I've heard. National syndicalism with a philosophy of actualism. So the fascists were not the fascist in the fascist mindset, in the Italian fascist mindset, if you acted Italian, uh which in the Italian fascist mindset would be, be a member of the fascist party, or or if you were culturally Italian, than you were Italian, which is why like a third, which is I don't know if it was a third, but a good portion of the Italian fascist party were actually ethnically Jews, but they didn't see themselves as ethnically Jews, they saw themselves as Italians. In fact, Mussolini's mistress was the one he was hung with, I think, was a Jew. Um, where so for the Italians, it's not for the Italian fascists. It wasn't necessarily what you were ethnically. It was how you acted, what your I guess maybe they would
Well,
describe it as nature, but
it's also like they had Italy and Germany had two different definitions of what the nation is. Germany was founded upon this idea of all the Germans being the same ethnic group, the same tribe, and that's what makes a nation. It is the ethnos that makes the nation. While then in Italy, for instance, they didn't see themselves as a one singular ethnic group. They saw themselves as multiple ethnic groups, but Italy itself, the state makes the nation. So that's why they can incorporate Jews. That's why they incorporated Muslims as well. Like there was the Libyans and Eritreans, Somalians, like had they were seen as full Italians as well because it was the nation who defines what an Italian is. Because Italy itself was not a homogenous sub little peninsula.
yeah.
Because like in
And
the north, for instance, like northern
And
Italy was more defined by the Lombards and is more ethno-Germanic mixed with Romanic. While then you go down south and it's more Romanic, and then you get a mixture of Greco and Arabic DNA floating in there too. So that's why there wasn't seen as like one Italian ethnic group.
yeah, and the
why they sort of forced it, there was sort of a forced Italian unification when it happened because I correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the different Italian groups not want to be unified together until they were kind of forced to be?
yeah, the two
Ye-
Sicilies remained one was independent, but it wasn't necessarily, everyone wanted to, the majority of people wanted to be Italy, and it was the stuffy aristocrats who wanted to maintain their power. No, it was just the fact that the Sardinians had conscription and an income tax, so they were able to forcefully, so they had the larger army and were able to beat up everyone. Although um, the there were resistance groups apparently in the two Sicilies for like a decade afterwards, like the Sanfedisto, I think, who continued on the struggle. I guess much as their grandparents had done when the French revolutionaries made the mistake of trying to conquer trying to conquer Sicily.
Well,
Sanfedisto is singular, Sanfedisti is plural, I
Oh
think.
I
well,
mean,
I'm
I
not.
mean, by the way, the French revolutionaries did actually conquer the Kingdom of Naples and Sicily. Um,
Yes, they did. Yeah, yes,
and
they did. And it was ruled by a Bourbon at the end, I think.
Well,
yeah, it was, but I mean, it was kind of like the French revolutionary concept of the nation, that it was the state that makes the nation. Because that was the fundamental ideology that came out of the French Revolution, and their version of liberalism. Like I do say there's a distinction between French liberalism and English liberalism, but they still float in the same school of general thought. Um, but the French idea of
Would it
liberalism
would it be
was
argued that sorry to cut you off, but would it be a good argument that America combined the worst of both French and English liberalism?
yes, because people like Thomas Jefferson were fundamentally of the French school, while then people like John Adams and Benjamin Franklin were of the English school of liberalism.
Um,
Um,
like on the idea of Democratic Republicans, Federalists, we would have to look at both parties and we'd see the Democratic Republicans tend to act a lot more radical at that time than the Federalists did. And the question I have is essentially, with that radical ideals, how did the Democratic Republicans come to overtake the Federalists?
Honestly, I think that's because they honestly had a greater animating spirit than the Federalists did. Because the Federalists, being founded upon the idea of the French liberal school, believed that it was the nation that defined what the ethnos is. I mean, like, you can kind of see that in America today, where it's like you must get rid of, like, America had this idea of you must get rid of your hyphenated identities. You can't be a German American anymore. You just must be American. And we're going to define who is an American. Like, initially, it used to be pretty much like white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, but then it was expanded when America opened up Ellis Island and all these other things to expand the definition of American, and it was the nation that told you that you are American. Well, then the Federalists, they had the more English liberal view that more was in line with like the German view of the nation, where it was the ethnos that came before the state. It was the ethnic group, and the state was just a result of the ethnic group. So that's why, like, the Federalists were much more weaker, because they did want like a more centralized state, but their animating principle is based around the idea fundamentally that the state doesn't matter and it's more the ethnic group that matters.
And to get back to Czar's point, he mentioned the two early political parties, the Federalists and what I'm going to call the Anti-Federalists. Our two political parties today are known as the Republicans and the Democrats. And they faced off against each other this Tuesday in an election.
Basically.
This election, in midterms, people are heavily over-exaggerating, in my opinion. It's like
Nothing happened. It was so anticlimactic. No one even won anything.
the most
I'm gonna-
most climactic election in American history was 1860, because that was basically deciding the course of the nation. And people are saying like it's the end of the United States because one party gained like 2 seats above another party in the House. Oh my god!
I mean,
love all
Not even
the- I
It's
love
not
all
even
the
likely
young
that the
hippies.
Republicans. It's not even likely that the Republicans will win control of the Senate. We have confirmed that Georgia is going to a runoff, and the Democrats are looking poised to take Nevada.
Really,
Now-
Nevada?
No,
yeah,
I'm looking at it right. I'm looking at it right now. Actually, I mean, like, I don't really care about elections because I'm not a liberal and I don't put any stock in elections. But I'm looking at it on Fox News as a updated one, and it's still leaning red, but it's like a hair trigger margin.
So
Yeah,
Well,
it's
I
like
think that-
93 reporting in, and we don't know how much votes are going to sway. Like, it could continue leaning red, but then it'll probably, if the votes are Democrat, then the Democrats effectively would have control over the Senate.
I'm gonna pull up Nevada specifically now.
On another note, has anyone seen all the young hipsters talking about how this was a great win from Gen Z because more young people came out to
Yeah,
vote
as
and
a Gen Z
overwhelmingly
guy-
voted Democrat or something like that?
the Gen Z guy, I say that all Gen Z people should go experience communism and socialism and then come back, and then we're gonna have like a full red country.
Yeah.
I mean, as one of the young people who didn't vote Democrat, well, maybe my
Part of-
ballot was. Anyways,
Part of the reason I think young people vote so heavily Democrat, not to cut you off, Charles, is that the Republicans' rhetoric primarily, what's the word I'm looking for? Appeals to nostalgia, and that only has really worked with older people who remember the good times, whereas the youth don't remember a better time.
The Republican Party
like-
right now is basically its doctrine is stuck in the Cold War, Interwar, and World War II era. It's like it's all like you said, it's all nostalgic. Many Republicans enjoy the idea of intervening for American interests in other countries, exactly like we did in the Cold War. Um, most of the time these days, these interventions to me are seeming more and more uh, unjustified
Well, your mic
rather
is echoing.
than back then, like in Vietnam and Korea. But that's just my view.
Oh well, it's your. I think you're causing Bizarre to.
I'm being echoed right now.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think I
it's
think Will's
Mike.
causing it.
Uh,
Oh,
Oh.
Mike died.
well,
Yeah.
It's done.
Anyways, what was it? Let's see. What was I gonna say? Shoot. I was
all
gonna
have those
say one of the
moments.
reasons for young people voting Democrat is the Democrats have control over the school system, so naturally, but I guess that's kind of a cliche thing at this point.
As someone in high school right now, I can definitely say that, yeah, don't go to California public schools if you don't want to be indoctrinated.
Forget your Storm of Steel. How about Iron Resolve of Steel?
Well, you see,
Imagine living in California.
Yeah, get out while you can
California,
before I close the
run.
border and
Run
force
like
everyone who's staying there to stay there in perpetuity.
I'm staying in California, guys. I love California. I just don't like their schools, and I don't like Los Angeles. You guys can nuke Los Angeles. I don't mind.
Well, honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that before all the WASPs showed up and turned California into what it was today, California actually was
It's a
it
very
was the
red
northern
state.
rim of Christendom, and there's still all these beautiful Catholic churches, and well, I don't know, I couldn't bring myself to destroy any Catholic church, but if there weren't the Catholic churches there and I could get everyone out, I would totally firebomb. No, I wouldn't
Well,
do that.
hey,
But
let's see here. So we have this thing called Northern California, which is still pretty cool. So how about we just nuke all of Southern California except San Diego, because that's a pretty cool city too. And then we just have Northern California and San Diego.
well, isn't
California
Northern
was
California?
originally supposed to be 2 states, and the northern half is supposed to be called Jefferson, so we can always still go for that.
I don't
Yeah,
like the name Jefferson. I have a personal hatred against Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah,
Right.
well, shoot, wasn't isn't part of the plan for Greater Idaho to like take
Idaho.
over Northern
Yeah.
California?
So
Yeah, I want
the
Greater Idaho
plan-
to happen so badly. I want the potato state to become a potato empire.
Right. So the Greater Idaho, the idea was edited down a bit to just eastern Oregon because some of the counties in northern California refused to participate, so they just stuck with eastern Idaho. I mean, not
Boo!
Idaho, Oregon.
You see,
So yeah,
this is like what do you call it? California used to be a very red state. It usually
Reagan
voted
actually
for
won it.
a lot of red Republicans: Herbert Hoover, Coolidge, Reagan, Eisenhower. It just seemed like over time it turned more and more blue by the elections that came, and by after Reagan's and Bush's or H.W. Bush's presidencies ended, it seemed to be more split, and then eventually it became a solid blue state.
Well, I think part of that has to do with the failures of the Republican Party in the past and the youth rebelling against that. Because, of course, we have that generation that came out of California in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah, it's like right now, I don't understand how anyone is voting Newsom right now because of how fucking terrible job he's doing. We barely have any water, and here's like some cities in California building water parks, and then we barely have any electricity, and here's Newsom banning gas car sales by 2035.
Honestly,
Blue,
you guys
no matter
deserve.
who.
Honestly, you guys deserve it. You guys didn't vote him out during the recall election. So
I blame
it just
Los
kind of
Angeles for everything. It's deciding the course of California, basically for all of us. And it sucks. To you, Los Angeles. Even if I do
yeah. So
in Universal Studios.
yeah, so I have been gathering information throughout the election. Not all of it, because we're still waiting on the votes to be counted in Arizona and Nevada. But I think later tonight we'll probably get the results in Nevada pretty soon, because it's like 93%. So we will be taking the House by a slim majority. Will, your mic's echoing me.
Yeah, well, you're.
Maybe well, if you're not speaking, maybe mute yourself because you keep echoing.
Yeah,
I don't think Will's.
Sorry.
Oh,
there he
Yeah.
is. All right.
you're.
Yeah. So we're right now we have 211 Republican seats. So, but we just need 218 to have majority in the House. So, we'll have it by a slim majority, like the Democrats had a slim majority in 2020. So, kind of similar. The red wave, that everyone's been hyping us up for, did happen in Florida because Ron DeSantis absolutely annihilated Charlie Crist by like 20 points. Rubio by 16, and then statewide offices with similar margins. All state legislators are controlled by the Republicans. 6 school board officials endorsed by DeSantis won their elections. So that Ron DeSantis turned Florida from a purple state to a red state in this election. So, but they managed to.
This is my analogy for like the quote unquote red wave. Just sorry to interrupt, but
Go for it.
I was thinking about this with like World War One. It's like, the red wave is like the British, French, or Germans storming a trench, losing tens of thousands to take the trench, and then immediately the side that they just took the trench from counterattack and retake the trench. That's the red wave.
Yeah.
The ideal of a wave is very uncommon in my eyes these days. Like, let's just take FDR's elections; those were waves.
Mm-hmm.
That's also because the people who voted actually, like, let's just say, had a higher IQ than the average voter today that just votes on tribe and tribal loyalties.
FDR was not the greatest president in peacetime. He was a good World War II president, but I mean, even that, he did some pretty major mistakes.
He was a good technocrat. He knew how to organize a bureaucracy, but that was like what he was good at.
Look how much he progressed. How much he added to the Great Depression with his quote-unquote New Deal that would have done quote-unquote better than whatever Hoover would have done. When Hoover actually had a plan that could actually help people, but it seemed like his political opponents wanted a Democrat in office after 3 presidencies of Republicans, and they blocked anything Hoover tried doing.
FDR also had a long-term vision of completely reforming the American state apparatus, like the bureaucracy and how it functioned. And like every single 3-letter agency you see today is a result of FDR. Every single one was created by FDR, and he replaced out the old bureaucracy that was, let's just say, inefficient and actually like quasi good for the average American, because it's like, it was harder for them to let's just say raise taxes and enforce a lot of draconian bureaucracy on people. With things like, say, the FBI, the CIA wasn't made in FDR's time, but he laid the foundations for it. He laid the foundations for the IRS that is used today to purposely tyrannize you out of your money. So I mean that was kind of his goal. Like the Great Depression was kind of like a talking point on his campaign and wasn't really his main focus.
Well, I mean, like, let's just see here. it seemed FDR used certain issues that were happening to his advantage for electability, such as the Prohibition, as well as the Great Depression. He did end Prohibition after promising to do that, and that got a lot of more votes than the Prohibitionist Hoover. However, again, I would like to state that Hoover's was amazing at actually helping a nation rebuild after a time of crisis. Look at what he did after World War One, his time in those programs, and look what he did after and during World War Two. He could have ended the Great Depression much sooner, and then he could have ended the Great Depression by a second term, most likely, and then move on and let the presidency move on to another president that had a long-term vision like Roosevelt.
By the
Well,
way, my great grandfather was a bootlegger, so during that period.
proudest
Let's
German
do-
American,
Yep.
least proud German American.
Love German Americans.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if any of my German relatives got up to anything of note, but
Mine did.
Yeah, mine did.
Mine were part of
Yeah, well-
mine were part of a mafia that wasn't really a mafia. They just called it a mafia.
Well-
if I may, since we talked about DeSantis, what do we think of the DeSantis Trump fight?
DeSantis 2024, let's go.
Alright,
It's not a Trump DeSantis ticket is not going to happen because
Definitely not.
Trump and DeSantis, I think, are honestly. I don't get Trump. He starts beef for no reason, and he started beef with DeSantis recently.
He's starting beef
So-
with Youngkin, which is the second most successful Republican governor in the Republican Party.
I was hoping we were saving that for until we got over the elections because they had a whole segue planned out. But now that I'll just keep that on the back burner. But yeah, I literally got into an argument on Twitter, surprise, surprise, with someone because she was going, "Why can't they just unite for a ticket? Trump and DeSantis 2024." And I'm like, that ship sailed long ago. Because do you really think Ron DeSantis would just come up and say, "Let's work together, Don. You've been insulting me for about a month now, but yeah, let's work together."
Let's just say in a hypothetical scenario, Trump was president again and DeSantis was his vice president. I am pretty sure something like Roosevelt and McKinley would happen. Trump gets assassinated, DeSantis becomes president. That's my alternate scenario.
Yeah. Also,
DeSantis also. Oh.
Also, Monarchist Minute is not advocating for the assassination of Donald Trump. All right, before anyone just takes it out of context. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
we
Doug.
don't.
Yeah. But I mean, it is good to think like a Machiavellian, which I mean, DeSantis, I think he thinks like a Machiavellian, but he's still a boomercon, unlike Trump, who wasn't really a boomercon, but he did understand how power actually works in government, and that's why he was very ineffective. So I would say, like, honestly, a Ron DeSantis approach with a Donald Trump, let's just say fervor and let's just say epistemology would be a good combo, but it's not going to happen in this nation's politics.
Yeah, just so everyone in the Discord audience and also the YouTube audience understands what the mindset of Donald Trump is like. This report came out today, like literally a couple of hours after the whole Glenn Youngkin insult. So Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, he's after the election that he won fair and square. Sorry, Stacey Abrams, you were never incumbent. He has redirected all of his networks in Georgia to get behind Herschel Walker so we can actually gain a seat in the Senate. And Mitch McConnell's also pitching in. Youngkin and DeSantis have expressed their willingness to help out with DeSantis for the base and Youngkin for the suburbs. Trump comes out. Wait, I'm not finished. Trump comes out and tells Georgia's GOP that if they accept the help of Youngkin and or DeSantis, he will refuse to support Walker in the runoff.
I feel like Trump seems to think that the GOP is his own personal fan club now,
It is.
and that he has a
Well,
monopoly
so.
on it.
Like, okay.
No, he. Okay, here's the thing with Donald Trump. How do I describe this? Okay, I don't know if the Republican Party can actually find someone like Donald Trump again, because here's the thing with Donald Trump: he's a self-made, small loan of $1 million from his parents, but he okay. I mean, there's one thing a small loan of $1 million, but he's a multi-millionaire, so he must have done at least something right. And he has his own money, and he has his own what do you call it? He has his own ideas,
Brand?
and this has all been pointed out to me, so you can feel free to call me a liar or whatnot, or dissent. But he also raised issues that we didn't know apparently we were allowed to raise. I mean, I wasn't really. I mean, 2016 was when I really started to get into politics. But he what was I gonna say? He he raised issues like the immigration issue to an certain extent, and saying, and stop this whole, and finally questioned the whole let's just free trade and free trade will solve everything idea. So Trump raised a lot of points, and I think that we should give him props for that. So I do. So I like him on that respect, and I don't know. I don't know if DeSantis is really as good a governor as everyone says he is. I mean, that's great. Keep him in Florida and let him do more work. I guess. I don't know.
Well, he knows how the levers of power actually work and function. So that's why I think he'd be honestly like a better man if he wanted to implement change. But I don't think he honestly wants to implement change. He just wants to kind of do like the normie Republican establishment thing of just being like, yeah, I just want to lower taxes. I want to keep my constituency fat and happy and kind of ignorant of actual problems that need to be solved, that we're just going to keep on kicking the can down the road because we're the Republican Party.
DeSantis.
I'm honestly just curious what's triggered this whole spat that Trump's had lately. Or then maybe he feels his ego's been bruised somehow.
I honestly think it's jealousy, because DeSantis is doing better in Florida than Trump did. Like, he won by more points than him. And I think he sees DeSantis as a threat. He also probably sees Youngkin as a threat. That's why he's attacking him. And I'm pretty sure later down the line, he'll probably go after some other Republican candidates, well, not candidates, like politicians, like Kim Reynolds, of the governor of Iowa. So yeah, I honestly don't know what provoked him, but
as long as he doesn't go after DeWine, I have nothing but good things to say about Mike.
I think that what may have happened is that the GOP, that the non-Trump, never Trumper GOPs may be trying to orient DeSantis as sort of like an alternative to Trump, because he is very popular. And because of that, and whether or not DeSantis wants to be the alternative to Trump, the whole Trumpism without Trump, because of that, Trump may feel that he needs to put down DeSantis, because DeSantis, I don't really think you could have Trump. I don't think Trumpism, I don't know, Trumpism without the guy who founded Trumpism doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But
Well, I mean, there was like before Julius Caesar came to power, there were people like Caesar in Rome, but let's just say they didn't know how to act. Essentially, they didn't know how to truly seize power and implement change in Rome that needed to be changed. And then Caesar came around later on, pretty much inheriting those issues, and he just marches legions in, because that's honestly how you change a system, is through something radical. Which I'm not advocating anything you two, but I'm just saying that's how you actually implement change. You just come in and you totally demolish the old structure and rebuild it around your own vision.
Look at what Napoleon did. Napoleon basically took the revolution and its chaos, formed it together into a monarchy that had revolutionary ideas, and actually made a nation that worked.
Yeah, my original comment was just on Trumpism. Now we're just talking about military takeovers, but so just gonna dial it back to my point.
I'm not saying
yeah.
military takeovers. I'm just saying how you totally destroy the system and recreate it. Like that's how you, if you want true change, like that's how you do it with a political system.
That'd be very difficult for a time like this.
But I was getting to my point. I don't think Trumpism is as successful as they were trying to make it out, because who was losing all these elections going on this midterm? They were all candidates endorsed by Trump. Like, obviously, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz won their their elections, because they're in red states. That's kind of expected. What we didn't expect was that they underperformed from their last election. Herschel Walker, who's going to be facing up with the runoff pretty soon next month, he underperformed Brian Kemp by 9 points, and Brad Raffensperger by 10. And those two were both attacked by Trump, and he publicly said that they should be kicked out of the GOP. So that's not a good sign. John Gibbs, I'm just going to give this one example before you guys make your point. John Gibbs, who was endorsed by Trump over moderate Peter Meijer, who impeached Trump back in 2020, he lost his election by 7 points because of, well, obviously his politics, where he said that women shouldn't have the right to vote, and it's kind of ironic because he lost to a woman. So, this election should just be a wake-up call to Republicans, because for the past three election cycles, they have this mindset that if they put up a candidate, no matter what they say, they're just going to automatically win. Well, this election just pretty much shows them that no, bad candidates are not going to be elected. You need good candidates.
Okay.
Well,
So
it's not even good candidates. I mean, it's honestly like it's the populist delusion. It's the belief that you can just whip up a crowd and implement change, that you can win in the polls and yada yada. It's a delusion, believing that populism will actually lead to victory long term. It's never succeeded anywhere. It's always led to just disingenuous political leaders. I mean, like honestly, like the MAGA Republicans, like they do produce some of the worst candidates ever. And that's because they simply believe like in this democratic process, and they believe that it's just the will of the masses that they need to fulfill in yada yada, and they just think that they can spontaneously do things through the will of the masses, which is never how politics work. I mean, that's honestly politics and decay is when you get those types of things.
So I am kind of involved in my local GOP chapter, that high school Republican stuff and all that good stuff. Like what we're trying to do here is not what the freaking Republicans are trying to do. Like you said, many Republicans are trying to just do like win and do stuff and not really change anything. California, I believe I said this before, is in a predicament that we need change to actually continue surviving as a functional state. And we've been trying everything to get out to the community, and we've been helping education. We got all that good stuff and everything on the city councils and the county and everything, and we're trying to actually do change other than win. As like I said, we need change. This Newsom right now is just destroying our supplies. He's not funding water. He's not funding energy like he should be. He's not stopping the constant construction of apartments that we can't afford because of how thin our electrical line, our power grid already is. And he's not really doing anything to help our state. So we're just trying to like actually win so we can change. Like it's just Republicans need to like take a look at what they're doing and see that if they're gonna want to win in the long term, they're gonna need to take a position where they need to do reform and change rather than just continue what do you call it? It's to continue the status quo of the Republican Party of getting elected and just doing the same thing the last president did.
Well,
And it's kind of was someone trying to make a point.
oh well, I mean, I was just gonna say that the Republican Party, I don't really know exactly what the Republican Party even stands for, because they want lower taxes. Yay, lower taxes, always a
The
cloud.
Republican Party is basically the Democrat Party a decade ago.
Well, yeah, no, I mean that's where they are now.
You're not. The thing is that Vic, you're not even wrong. Like you're not even actually wrong. Like if you look at it, literally just if you go back 10 years, Obama basically thought what the Republicans thought.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
I made that point
The
before. But
Republican
I'm
Party
just-
are just a status quo party. Like they want the status quo. They never have any will for change, and they just want to peter along the current political system. Like
Okay.
that's honestly like it's the boomer
You,
mentality.
And
Yes.
that's
Can you stop
why,
with just this
even
with your
if-
constantly just like, oh, it's the boomers' fault for everything at this point. It's not exactly a really good argument. I'm not saying that boomers are even that great. Yes, they've obviously screwed up a lot of stuff, but it's a weak
you
argument.
want to know exactly what we're fighting for.
I say boomer is more like an epistemology instead of just saying like the generation itself. But it's like
I know, but that's still not exactly a good argument. You're saying, oh, it's the boomers' fault. It's like, yeah, yes, I can understand that, but it's not just the boomers' fault though.
What do you
Well,
call it?
I'm not even saying it's the boomer's fault. I'm saying it's a boomer mentality. Like I'm not blaming the
What
boomer
does that even
generation
mean?
as a whole.
I'm not
It's-
saying that. You
it's-
keep on saying that it's the boomer generation. I'm not saying that.
It's the mentality of, well, I don't need to care about what the world's going to be like because I'm going to be dead in a few years. Mentality.
Okay,
Like,
I can tell you.
we're just going to peter out the
Well,
system.
then that
so I
would
can keep
that
on-
would basically be anyone. Like even if you have like the green, like the green generation of like nowadays, they don't actually give a damn. They don't care about
Well,
anything
yeah,
at this point. It's just
they don't. Nobody cares
then
about
literally
like, what
then
20 years will
everyone
look
then
like.
everyone has it.
Well, yeah,
Everyone has the
they
boomer
shape
mentality
it.
then.
Okay, well, I can tell you exactly what we're trying to do in the California GOP right now. You guys want to know?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, we have a set of things we're trying to do here. One, we're trying to fund more water resources so we can actually have water. Two, we're funding agriculture and helping the farmers because we really want to do that. Three, lower taxes.
Well, there's where all your water resources are going. The fact that people are trying to grow crops year round in the middle of a bloody desert.
Yep. Okay. If you go down to Los Angeles, that's probably a very deserty-like region. They have an entire full lake there. While in Northern California and Central California, the lakes and reservoirs are depleting. That is the type of thing that we really don't understand is how Los Angeles has more water than actual places in California that are trying to farm stuff. Which we have some very good agricultural places, and we're not all desert. That's mainly Southern California. It's like the California GOP is trying to take what the old, like not really taking what the old Republicans did, we're trying to like actually do full-on reform of California, funding police, funding fire, trying to find alternatives to water resources, trying to find help for farmers, trying to relieve the pressure off of the people living here because of how freaking expensive it is to live here, as well as to try and help the state in general and try and expand the energy grid and just totally change the state basically, which is much more difficult than you would think.
It is incredibly difficult to change a population that is so far to the left, it would make Mao blush.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say this here. Like honestly, the best thing you can do politically is to create your own parallel institutions, to endorse your own schools. Don't send your kids to public schools that are run by your political enemies. Don't endorse the system as much as possible. Minimize the amount of tax that they receive. Go off grid. Try to have your own energy supply. Try to have your own heating. Just try to create your own communities that are separate from the system that hates you.
See, Kohun,
like that's honestly like that should be the mentality going forward.
see, Kohun,
Like that's what I'm at. That's what I'm saying.
Californians are having a struggling time and actually affording. You do realize how expensive our houses are, right? And our property taxes.
I do know.
Okay, yeah, we can't really right now. Many of us, I know in my community anyway, are very dependent on the statewide energy source because of how expensive we are, how much already paying to actually live in the state and actually have a decently nice house and decently nice community. Like, it's expensive, and we don't have the actual money to actually build an independent energy source, an independent like water source in our own community. It's almost impossible as of now until we relieve the pressure off of the actual people of the community itself. It's like we need the time.
So I'm saying like just if you can minimize it as much as possible, that should be your epistemology, the way that you think about it, because you should see this. You should see the state that purposely they hate you, like the people that run the state, especially like by the state I mean the regime, especially in California, like they hate you. They want to suck you dry of all your taxes and give it to third worlders that they invite in by the boatload. Like that's honestly like their vision.
That is actually
So
honestly
if you
what the
can,
California
if you
government's
can,
doing. Like Newsom
yeah,
is
exactly. So
saying,
that's why you should view them as an enemy, and you should try to evade and flank your enemy as much as possible, and just try to get around them. And you're outnumbered by your enemy, so you must do a fighting withdrawal.
yeah,
Like,
Newsom
that's honestly what you got to do.
Monarchist of America does not advocate for armed conflict in the United States.
I'm speaking in an abstract. Like, I'm not speaking literal fighting, but like treating it like it is a conflict, but not a.
Kohun and
Yeah, I'm
Chad.
just saving us from YouTube here.
Kohun and Chad are gonna get
Yeah,
us flagged on YouTube. I just know it.
No, well,
Yeah.
here's the thing though. With the parallel institutions, Darth gives some very sound advice because we don't want anarchy and we don't want the system to completely collapse because that would result in a lot of misfortune. Ideally, we would just sweep. Ideally, things would get bad enough for us to sweep into power, then we could fix things and everything goes back to normal. Although whether or not that, I don't know of any instance in history where that actually happens. But well, not back to normal, back to a better normal, not a new normal though. That term's kind of already been ruined. But having parallel institutions of support, like rather than relying on employer provided healthcare, like getting together with a bunch of lads in your parish and essentially pooling your resources, so when one of you goes down, you have the money right there, and you relying on your neighbors and your neighbors doing the handy things like getting the sidewalks clean, because all of that.
Also, like
It makes sense because
in that case too, it's like also getting your own physicians, like getting your own positions that think like you, that are like at your parish, to be like, okay, well, I'm going to essentially do things on the cheap and not like, not submit to corporate medicine in America, and like, just do favors for their own community. Like, you gotta think like on that community terms, not on the individual terms as well, when you're trying to create parallel institutions.
Oh yeah, and yeah, no, I mean it's
And of course, if you create parallel institutions, so one guy that's a really big fan of parallel institutions is, I believe, Andrew Torba, the CEO of Gab.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, that guy. I
Gab.
Okay, I don't know.
I forgot that was
It's
a
like Twitter for
company.
neocons.
Yep. But
Is
I mean, like, it's the right frame of mind, like, trying to create your own social media where you keep the left out from it, like, explicitly. Like, that's a parallel institution right there. I mean, even if it's still like somebody's trying to do something, instead of everybody just complaining about it, do nothing, and just continue getting kicked on the curb by your political enemies.
I have a scenario that I would like to discuss here about the 2024
Shoot.
elections. Okay,
Okay.
so we know in 1912, Republican Party split between Taft and Roosevelt and allowed Wilson to win. I feel like if DeSantis or Trump runs and both of them run, I think the same thing is going to happen in 24. Party is going to split. Because
Only if DeSantis, the only way I could see that happening is if DeSantis wins the GOP nomination and Trump decides, you know what, I'm going anyway, I'm running as an independent.
Yep, that's exactly what Roosevelt did, except with the Progressive Party. I could see Trump doing that very easily. He's narcissistic and he wants to win.
Of course, I think that in a head-to-head, I have seen people that are conservative claim that they support Trump because DeSantis essentially is backed by or
By
goes to
Rhino.
bat for people like the Bushes and let me look back up here.
Yeah,
He
Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell. Yeah,
Quote
I
unquote
see those
rhinos.
claims as well. Yeah, they're called
they're
rhinos.
calling for him to that because DeSantis, the so-called rhino, they will vote for Trump
Okay, guys, I have a
because Trump took the bullets for basically all of the conservatives when he was in the White House.
I have a solution to all of this.
Okay.
We make a monarchy.
Well, yeah, that would be the
So
obvious
obvious
solution.
That's a novel
solution.
concept. I had never heard that. we should discuss this further on Monarchist.
Hey,
Where-
let us
is
just try to
the,
find our Julius Caesar, guys.
where is the Obi-Wan Kenobi meme? That's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
Oh my god. Let's get some humor into this.
Yeah. So I just want to briefly say this, and then someone can say something else. DeSantis did say when he was on the campaign trail, but obviously don't take a politician by his word. He did
Never
say
take it.
that. Yeah, never take it. Don't. So DeSantis said he will not run for president if Trump is running. And Trump is saying that on November 15th, he'll be making an announcement, and I'm pretty sure we all know what's going to happen.
Yep. I can.
So
Trump Tower all over again. I can see it now.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yes, and
The only type of politicians that are not really politicians that one should look up to are monarchs and royals. It's pretty obvious that those are the only people.
well, it depends on it depends on which royal.
True.
Because if we're talking about Prince Harry,
No,
then
no,
no.
no, 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 no,
Oh
no,
yeah,
no, no.
no. No,
talking
he's
about
Prince Andrew, then no.
I'm talking about people like Blessed Karl, Tsar Nicholas II, Kaiser, the King George V, the Queen, all those type of monarchs actually did stuff for their nation.
Charles the First, especially Charles the First.
Oh yeah, definitely Charles the First. Charles the Second.
For who better may the scepter sway than he that hath such right to reign?
We gotta whatchamacallit, resurrect Hamilton, and make him convince everyone to be federalist and make a monarchy.
No.
No, we need to remake Hamilton, but make it historically accurate.
Yeah, no, and that requires us to not rap. Bring back white people, and then have Hamilton get shot.
So I say, like, let's do the Prussian plot again.
I mean, like I say, better a Protestant on the throne of Edward the Confessor than a republic. I mean,
Okay, so I want a Romanov on the American throne, but it's totally not biased because I'm Russian and part of the Russian royal aristocracy. Totally not biased.
Hey, I can at least say my Jacobitism is not ethnically based because I'm only a little bit English, Scottish, and Irish, and Welsh, and all that. So I can legitimately say my wanting the lawful heir of the House of Stuart on our throne is not ethnically based. It's
Hey, we quabble about that at the Regency Council.
I'll see you there, number 70.
So there's a interesting topic I was reading about. Like a complete theory. There's no factual evidence to this whatsoever about Russia. It's that this war will cause a political upheaval that could potentially restore the Tsardom, which I kind of hope that happens.
One could only dream.
Yeah.
So
One can only.
So I mean, I would say I support that claimant because I've been tracking Russian politics for years now, and I've talked to Russian monarchists, and there's about a monarchist demonstration, like either religious ceremony, like it typically coincides with Orthodox religious ceremonies, but demonstration for the Tsar has exponentially grown in the past decade in Russia. So, and it's roughly about a third of the population are actively want to replace the presidency with the Tsardom, and about another third are apathetic, and about a third are opposed. AKA, most of the people that are opposed vote for left-wing parties in Russia.
It's like what do you call it? Just imagine that the popularity of the Tsardom is already increasing and is probably going to overtake the Republicans. Just imagine the Tsardom restored, what that will do with the status quo of republics and monarchies. It could possibly cause many many Slavic countries to rethink their republicanism and restore the monarchy. Serbia, whatchamacallit,
Well,
Yes, it would, but it would also cause the U.S., I think, to bury the hatchet with China to try to eliminate the Tsardom as soon as it got established again.
well, you could,
Yeah.
that could be true.
bury the hatchet with China. You gotta be
Well,
kidding.
you see,
Impossible.
That's
Yeah.
not
what do
gonna
you call it?
happen.
No.
The United States would probably be so anti-monarchy that they would not allow a restoration of a monarchy without the U.S. getting
I
involved in
disagree
trying to
with that.
stop
I
it.
disagree with
Well,
that.
that
So-
depends.
Remember
No,
what happened?
no,
Remember
no.
what
Whoa, whoa,
happened in
whoa, whoa.
Italy?
Hold on.
Hear me out. But in this case, restoring the monarchy would make them a natural enemy of Vladimir Putin.
Exactly.
So,
Look at this. Restoring the monarchy would basically, the Grand Duchess is not Putin. She is actually very open to the West, and could be a perfect example of how a monarchy and the United States could work together against a common enemy, which would be China.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and also
but
they got nuked.
most Russian monarchists are anti-Western, so I don't think that would go over well.
I mean,
If
like,
suddenly Russia became, even if a monarchist Russia became aligned with the West, because that would be, let's just say, politically
Yeah.
untenable even for an absolute monarch to do.
The greatest that we could see is Russia just become neutral in the world and just be like, yo, I don't really care what's happening in Western Europe anymore. You guys do what you guys want to do. It's probably not.
For the return of multipolarism, period, because the multipolar world was actually the most peaceful time in human history. Two polarity during the Cold War and monopolarity under the American regime post the Cold War has seen actually more war and conflict across the world than when you had, like, say, the different European power blocks, like before World War One.
Yeah.
If you'll allow me to make a counter, I suppose, argument, or rather continue my point, I think that it's not controversial among this audience, at least, to say that we may have had something to do with the Italian election of 1948, in which the Italians voted, air quotes, to make a republic as opposed to restoring their monarchy after World War II.
I think it was 1946, not 48.
Okay, thank you. 1946. But it wouldn't surprise me if there were rumblings about a potential election within Russia along those same lines, that certain forces wouldn't go into Russia to try to rig it.
Well, we're not
For
saying
By the
that.
way, with Italy, the United States actually held Italian POWs longer than the Geneva Convention allowed, so that way the Italian POWs wouldn't vote for the monarchy. And two, the CIA actually did assist in funding the Italian Communist Party to monitor polling stations to intimidate voters not to vote for the monarchy.
Sometimes I really hate the United States foreign policy.
Oh yeah.
Well, don't hate the country. Hate the institutions.
That's why I said foreign policy.
Hate the regime.
I already said it.
I love the United States. I just hate the foreign policy and its regime.
No, I mean, no, it's.
Foreign policy
to see
is so Cold War like. We're not in the Cold War anymore, but we've continued keeping our Cold War policy. I mean, I agree having a Cold War like policy on China, trying to beat China in an arms race, but like we should not have kept the Cold War policy on Russia. That's just going to cause a second Cold War with the biggest nuclear power in the world. And then like we need to be more open to the world these days, and perhaps even then, maybe the world will like us more and accept us more and accept our ideals more.
well, we don't want the world to certainly accept any of our
I don't
ideals.
want the rest of the world to accept American republicanism
I
and
mean
American liberalism.
the Constitution and those ideals, not republicanism.
And it's a part of, literally, the American Constitution is liberalism embodied in a piece of paper.
Yeah.
I mean, I think no, I mean, Russia. Here's the thing with Russia. Russia is a country that we should have wiped the slate with after the Cold War.
Russia wasn't the Soviet
And-
Union. We forgot that.
Yeah. Russia and the Soviet Union are not the same thing, but rather than seeing Russia, and once again, I wasn't alive during all this, but rather than seeing Russia, as another great power, because at the end of the day, Russia still wields considerable influence, not necessarily as much as the Soviet Union did. But rather than seeing Russia as an equal and as a country to either work with or at the very least respect, we decided to keep treating the Russians as these the Russian nation, as backwards, and we didn't want to. I don't know. I mean, we didn't give the Russian people, I guess, the respect that they deserved, because at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, Russia is still a great power, and Russia can still throw her weight around.
I mean, like, even with
and it's
And
taking.
also throw the occasional nuke as well, so keep that in mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's taking everything that we have to slow them down or stop them in Ukraine, and that's just because we're
Literally,
chucking everything we have at it.
literally, we don't have any infantry-based anti-tank capabilities until 2025 because we gave it all to Ukraine. But that's a whole nother
I have a
spiel.
personal.
Well, that's where you come in, Darth. Just dig anti-tank ditches.
Yeah, well, my anti-tank ditches are meant for our tanks to use as a protection for themselves on the battlefield. I mean, I can make tank traps as well, but that takes a lot of time in
Well, you better
and in
get
a
to it.
battlefield. But that's also like another tangent that I could go on about the Army Corps of Engineers. But
I'll say.
but essentially, I wanted to say this about like Russia and America. I mean, America, I would say, like the reason why it had such hostility is because I think honestly the American regime is anti-European civilization. And why do I say that? Well, they promoted let's just say a lot of deviant activities, like especially the CIA, like promoting homosexuality to oppose communism, supporting a lot of other deviant lifestyle things. What else? Oh yeah, also let's just say de-emphasizing Christianity as being important in European history, yada yada, and trying to secularize everything, and all that. But if you take the Christian worldview, you would actually see that Russia is an integral part of European civilization. Like I say, European civilization stretches from Vladivostok to Los Angeles. And we shouldn't see each other as enemies because we're part of the same civilization. And we just need to get over the mentality that Russia is not part of European and Christian civilization.
Okay. I agree with this.
And
It's
from
like the
just wanted to make it clear. He means from Los Angeles to Vladivostok going the long way, not around the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, not going simply across the Pacific.
what do you call it?
Because that would include Japan, which I don't think Japan's part of European civilization.
We'll add that the United States foreign policy from the Cold War all the way to modern day is basically supremacy over the world. Because supremacy the United States wanted during the Cold War was so communism could not expand. And I can get that. I mean, like, communism is bad, But, like, now the Cold War is over, and China is not the country will try and expand communism because everyone around them hates them. It's like Soviet Union was the last country I saw. What do you call it? I could expand communism well, and could expand communism large, and that's why the United States wanted supremacy over the continent so they could stop the expansion of the Soviet sphere. However, that era has ended. We need to rethink our foreign policy and make it more about cooperation than about supremacy. Because if we keep it about supremacy, eventually more and more nations will come against us because they don't want to be under our sphere anymore because we don't have self-determination that is under our sphere of supremacy of the United States.
Just by the way, look at the Nord Stream pipeline and Germany's attempt at their own self-sufficiency from the American system.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I mean this mentality that we have of being the only kid on the block.
Or like the big bully in a school.
Yeah, no, I mean it's one, it's dangerous. But two, well, I think that we really should, and I know this is gonna sound not nice and trampling on nations' self sufficiency, yada independence or whatever. But at the end of the day, historically, big nations have always held sway over small nations. It's just that until recently, uh, you held sway over nations in your own neighborhood, the same continent or whatever. But and then in the 18th century, we could really, well, I guess 17th century is when we started to have global empires. But we really should, because at the end of the day, we have been getting into a lot of scraps with Russia after, like Syria. We tried to back, um, shoot, who was going after Al Assad? Which, may I remind you guys that Call of Duty had a character named Al Assad as the leader of
What?
the opposition in like 2007. So did Call of Duty predict that we would be fighting a guy named Al Assad? I
Yes.
mean, they got the place wrong. The
No,
map very clearly
you
shows
mean
Saudi
us?
Arabia.
You mean Assad? You mean
Oh, it's
Assad?
Assad.
I'm sorry, I don't
Yeah.
speak. Whatever.
But
Anyways, the
but
map clearly
I mean
showed.
also like just to compare this, like I know exactly what you're talking about with the first Modern Warfare game. The Al Assad guy, like it's kind of funny because they modeled him after Assad. They purposely did that because they made it look like a Ba'athist regime, yada yada, make it look like the Arabic socialist regime that Assad reigns over in Syria, and they vaguely put it in the Mediterranean Sea, and it's invading an Arab state in the Mediterranean Sea. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That's totally not Syria. And yada yada. Russians are behind the nuking of the city that the American Marines invade. Yada yada. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We also want you to think Russia as an enemy. Like it's subtle little. I essentially say the Modern Warfare series is Neocon America, the video game.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I fell for it. I mean, I was like, yeah, beating up Russians for some reason. Yeah, like, oh, look at these cool resistance fighters who suspiciously seem to be getting a lot of funding from us. Yeah, like,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I fell for it. I mean, fun campaign
Hold
though.
on.
But
Yeah, we get to kill a U.S. general in the second game, so
well, because it's not good when you know that we're warmongering. We can warmonger in private all we want, but if it becomes known, well, that's a problem.
Okay, so
Yep.
we are in a changing world. The Cold War has ended, and now the world is leaving Earth, more so going into a new space race, in which that
You can,
is an arena
and you
that
can,
I want the United States to have hegemony in. Is I don't think allowing China to exist in space is such a good idea, especially since they're not really our friends. It's
and of course, you can circumnavigate the globe by airplane in a day. Think about that. Just think about that. You can circumnavigate the globe in a day by airplane, assuming you have enough fuel.
yeah, we are in a changing world. This world is more.
So regional power, that's great and all, but you have influence put upon you by every other nation. And that is entirely possible now. It was impossible back in the Middle Ages and the Victorian period. It was impossible.
It's this changing world is like regional powers don't really matter anymore, as they can just be dictated by a power like the United States, China, or Russia. That's the exact same thing that would happen in a new space race. Is that there'll be three main nations, probably all against each other, trying to go to space, gain hegemony over each other because they want the first moon military base, they want the first Mars base, all this stuff that could be used to the advantage of a home country. It's like in the same thing that's happening on Earth right now, and where the United States has military bases all over the world to protect itself, as well as probably its allies, but probably mainly itself.
Well, when we get glorious first Space War, Space War
Space Wars.
1, we can at least finally say thanks, Obama, because remember, there was a petition to the White House that got the required signatures for the White House to address it, and it demanded that we build a Death Star. And Obama or someone in his cabinet or whoever said, "No, we're not building a Death Star." Now, this has left us completely unprepared, and it took until President Trump for us to establish Space Force, and he didn't even see the ambitious. I'm not normally in favor of the mass will of the people, but in this case, the people knew what was right. We need a Death Star, except maybe a smaller scale one, so we don't accidentally blow up the entire world, just the part of the world we're trying to destroy. But
If we just blow up North Korea.
yeah, it turns
Monarchist,
out, I don't know, turning
Monarchist
South
Minute
Korea
does
into an
not
island, you had to change all the
advocate
maps.
Oh, okay.
Monarchist Minute does not advocate for the complete and total annihilation of a certain individual country.
Speak for yourself.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, Timbuktu, I could do without it. The National Republic of Timbuktu has kind of been on my strike list for a while.
This is a message to YouTube. We are, like Kaiser said, we are not advocating for the entire destruction of Earth. We are not Palpatine, and we don't want to kill everyone.
The Empire did nothing wrong, though.
The Empire did do nothing wrong. The Empire was...
Besides
the Empire was right and
the
just.
rebels were terrorists.
Besides the reluctance to recycle and just letting all your trash out into space, that minor criticism aside, the Empire totally never did anything wrong, and they didn't genocide the Ewoks, and if they did, they deserved it.
What do you have against?
But in fairness, the Ewoks are just kind
What
of
do you
annoying.
have against teddy bears?
That's
They're
what they are. They're
furries.
just teddy bears. They were made to sell toys. They deserved everything they got.
What happened?
Also, let's not forget the Merchant of Mos Eisley. I'm joking, you two. I'm joking.
Anyway,
Let's
so back to United States politics. So we're gonna probably see the Republicans hold the House and Democrats hold the Senate. We all know that, all that good stuff. I am kind of concerned.
we got an update. I'm sorry, Bob. We got an update as we are recording that Joe Lombardo is projected to perhaps win the Nevada governorship, which would be the Republicans' one and only flip of the governor's races.
Yeah, I got that update.
Oh,
Go ahead, Bob.
cool. Me? Oh, yeah. I'm also looking at the Senate results right now. It shows that LXIII has 48.6%. He gained a couple of more votes, but Catherine, the incumbent Democrat, I can't. Her name isn't popping up. She has 48.4, so they're very, very close.
So what I think will happen is there is actually still a chance the Republicans can win the Senate, if I'm correct. Please correct me if I'm wrong. The House is...
So
there is a very, very slim chance that LXIII would have to hold on and win in Nevada, and Herschel Walker would have to win his runoff.
Yeah.
Both of those things must happen if the Republicans want to gain a one-seat advantage in the Senate.
Oh, okay. A one-seat advantage, surprisingly, does not sound like much, but that could change the whole entire game for the next 2 years.
Oh yeah, especially since the current lineup is literally just a 50-50 split with the Vice President Kamala Harris being the tiebreaker vote. So if they get an extra seat, they can actually have they have to force Democrats to actually negotiate because they can't start pushing for policies anymore or
Republican,
certain people for
keep
judgment.
in mind, Bob, Republicans are likely to get the House of
House is
Representatives.
more important than the
Oh yeah,
Senate.
that too.
House is decides, if I'm correct, is more important than the Senate with its decisions, and could probably, and it's the one house that can question all officials in the United States of America, even the president.
Oh yeah, definitely. They're both important, but the House is definitely very important. They just have that slight disadvantage with having an election every 2 years, but with that they call it a disadvantage. I call it an advantage because that means I can get rid of all of them every 2 years.
Well,
Well,
let's see. President of the United States is obviously probably not even in control. Probably being corrupted. This might be a conspiracy theory, but I really don't care. This seems like it. He seems too brain dead to actually be president.
well, every president is corrupted by
I know
something.
that.
Trump was corrupted by his ego.
Well, I think. Okay, now hear me out.
Okay.
We all have speculations as to who really is the power behind the not throne. What if we're all spending too much time focusing on the POTUS when we should be focusing on the LOTUS?
Okay, this is my theory. Joe Biden.
Oh,
Biden?
what? The
The
POTUS?
First lady of the
Joe
United
Biden?
States. Yes, it is an official
Biden
term.
never wanted to be president, but his wife and the National Convention of the Democratic Party forced him to be president and confused him into doing it. Now, YouTube, this is not a conspiracy theory podcast. This is just my own little speculation. Fun.
What do you think this is? Conspiracy
Yes.
This is welcome to conspiratorial consecutive moment. I'm Charles York.
How about no?
Wouldn't that just be InfoWars?
It's like a.
Well, I don't think I could top Alex Jones. I mean,
Nobody can top him.
let's invite him. Let's. I
Put
mean,
his
he
stuff
was
in the
only $5
water
million.
that'll turn
Okay,
the fucking
funny thing, he did have a
frog.
monarchist on his show. He did have Curtis Yarvin on his show. Which Curtis
Speaking of
Yarvin is
Yarvin,
like
we
this
should get Curtis Yarvin on our show.
He maybe, but I think he typically only goes on the channels with let's just say a decent amount of clout on the dissident right in general. He'd probably watch a few of these podcasts and be like, these are a bunch of normies.
Okay, I have a question for you all. Has Charles Coulomb, or I don't know how to pronounce his name, ever been on this call before?
Yeah,
Yes.
two times
He's
actually.
been on it twice.
Fun.
Where have you been?
Yeah, first
where have
appearance.
you been?
First appearance in episode number 22. Special guest Charles. No, I'm joking. I don't know. I can't tell you what episode number it was. But special guest Charles Coulomb, and then in our 1 year anniversary.
I haven't watched all the episodes.
Thank you for maintaining your sanity.
Yeah, trust me, I'm on this podcast and I barely rewatch
Does
any of
anyone
them
here?
Yeah,
when they get
rewatching.
uploaded.
I don't. This has
Is
zero.
anyone
rewatching
here
value.
in a currently in a mental asylum?
Well,
I
I don't consider myself in a mental asylum. I consider my body in a mental asylum, but my mind is free as a bird.
You are in a mental asylum.
Well, don't you?
I'm
Hey, haven't you guys ever read James Burnham's the therapeutic state? I mean, this is the therapeutic state. America is it's all a psychiatric ward.
I mean,
We're all
I'm in
clinically
Ohio,
insane.
so my state's already an insane asylum.
I'm definitely in the asylum.
Stay,
I appeared on Avoiding Babylon. That has a bunch of
My
nutcase
state is
on.
just on fire.
Yeah,
No,
they're
all of America's a insane
My state's just
asylum.
on fire, so like.
Well, at least we know we're free. Free to do what? Not a lot of good. Free to do.
Yeah.
We won't forget the men who died who gave that, and we won't forget the men who died who gave that right to us.
Yeah,
Well-
as long as you don't cross the wrong paths and the wrong political figures and the wrong corporate CEOs, then
Okay,
you're fine. Then you're free.
Yeah.
Yeah, the best thing. No, I mean, on a serious note, because I know I've been kind of the joker for the past few minutes. The best thing we can do, I think, to honor those who died for our country, those who were, those who truly did love, every man who truly did love his country who died. The best thing we can do is keep on loving this country ourselves. And in the Catholic tradition, of course, love means to will the good of the other. And that means advocating for monarchism, I guess, and also the confessional state and everything, but also helping those around you, and always seeking the good, even when it's difficult. And I think in that respect, even if we as individuals aren't called to lay down our lives, we can still in some way try to honor the sacrifice of those men who did go before us and who actually did, as the songs say, who, even though I have my problems with the whole, beautiful for pilgrims' feet, but the whole, who more than selves their country loved, and mercy more than life. I think that's really the way that we honor them, is by trying to be, I guess, the way that we try to deserve, I guess, even though I guess we didn't, at least that we currently don't deserve their sacrifice.
God bless.
I don't know. That's
Beautiful.
just my 2 cents.
Anyway, we should probably wrap this up.
Oh yeah, definitely. We've been rambling on for 2 hours straight.
Oh, that's
Hey,
nothing for this podcast.
we've gone for like almost 4 hours before just rambling.
You guys haven't.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the
the
live stream.
We literally
about
did that last time.
well,
I think actually.
Well, no,
No,
I'm
look.
saying no for the
Technically-
actual main show. We've done it like almost
yeah.
4 hour longs.
Almost.
The live stream. The live stream technically is not a part of the podcast.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, no, I think I can't remember which episode is almost. Hold on, I can look through the entire playlist and see. Just don't give me my stupid recent one. We have 62 Monarchist minute videos, and then plus the one blooper, and we're not doing that again. Let's see. Let's see. We have hour 21, hour 50, hour 255. I voted. See, I know we have one that's over 3 hours. I think we have one that's over 3 hours. Where did it go? Oh yeah,
One's
3
almost
hours,
4
43
hours.
minutes, 50% more podcast. I don't remember anything about that, except I thought the titles. No.
That was like me, you, and someone else. It was just the three of us
It was
for the
John.
majority of the.
It was John.
Yeah, and John, and we started talking about metaphysics, and that's like epistemology, metaphysics, theology, philosophy. All those things are my forte. So it went on for a long time.
Okay, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
and I was just sitting there mesmerized, trying to soak all this information in.
Okay, yeah. So hold on. So here's the timestamps for that video: 0 minutes intro, 1:15. Congress trying to create a federal law about gay unions, which ends up being a discussion on monarchist philosophy as regards to a written constitution. I'm very concise. I'm very concise. Okay, and then 1:40:01. Mass shooter stop with the clock. Then a bashing of red flag laws. 2:47:39, Dr. Fauci, the movie, and then 3:42:24, outro prayer. I think that has to be not only is that the longest episode, I think that's the longest time stamp. It's like Congress trying to create. I'm not going to rewatch that segment, but if I didn't know what Monarchist Minute was, that would probably be the first segment I click on.
You call it
Oh,
Oh.
This has been a fun
You sound like you're dying there.
Oh,
Yeah.
do we need to call
Also-
911?
Also,
Are we all
uh,
We
dying?
need to call 911. Are you okay?
No,
Charles is in a
Would you
cave
like-
in Michigan.
I'll take a drink of water.
Okay, well, while he takes a drink of
Oh, I'm done.
water, I just wanted to remind everyone that Thanksgiving is coming up in a couple of weeks.
That's racist.
No. Hey, that was when the Puritans started to take over America.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah.
I'm all for having a day where we eat turkey, and I'm all for having days where we give Thanksgiving. In fact, there are masses of Thanksgiving, I think. But
Yes, there is a set of orations of Thanksgiving that you tack on to the orations of a particular mass. I'd have to look that up, and that's for a different podcast.
Yeah. Well,
There's always been a harvest festival in almost every single civilization ever to exist in mankind. So Thanksgiving is just America's harvest festival, but most Americans aren't farmers these days, so they kind of just think, oh, turkey. Oh, harvesty looking things, even though I don't know what half these things are
We should
that are
have
on
a
the
proposition.
table.
We should close down the internet and make everyone farmers again. Alright, that's my.
Yes,
Mhm.
I said I'm a literal feudalist, so I endorse this statement.
I do love me some feudalism. And people say it's bad. No, but you
It was
know,
the best system to ever
really not.
exist.
no. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I think maybe subconsciously I've gotten to the point where I'm sick of, where I just treat everything that I've ever been taught as a lie until proven otherwise. Like, you're telling me that that there are there's only the animal and only the plant kingdom, huh? Well, apparently there's like 7 kingdoms of living species, but
I mean that's part of the truth regime that they want you to believe
Everything
anyway.
is God and
So,
God is
which I'm
everything.
not saying
Okay,
that that's
it.
false.
Oh my god.
I don't know. But I honestly, as far as I'm concerned, if it's incapable of moving on its own, it's a plant. If it is capable of moving on its own, it's an animal, and the viruses are just some weird thing. That's
Viruses
all I
are
really care
weird.
to know.
Yeah.
What about fungi?
Plant, because it can't move on its own.
Some can.
Animal. I don't know.
Okay,
I don't want to
okay.
get into that. Fungi
Guys,
freak me out.
we are
So,
finishing this up. We can save the
That's fine.
biology and zoology debate for the next podcast.
well,
Yeah.
I mean, if we're
That'll
all
take it
good,
to the VC.
yeah. If we're all good to wrap up.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, no one
Say your
has
hot
objections.
takes now.
Going once. Going twice.
Right.
Sold for the amount of $20.16. All right, new timestamp for outro. Okay, if you would like to join us live on Monarchist Minute, share your wonderful and completely relevant opinions in the conference text chat, you can join us on Discord, link in the description box below. If you would like to follow us on Twitter, which may or may not be being destroyed for the memes, you can follow us on Twitter, link in the description below. If you don't like Twitter and you are a neocon, my condolences. But you can join us on Gab, link in the description below. If you are old and have a Facebook, you can join us on Facebook. Say it with me now, link in the description below. And we
That'd
also
be
have
$8.
some other stuff, but I'm too lazy to say. I mean, we have a website and then maybe something else, and Instagram. I need to start doing something about that. And now it is time for one final timestamp, and we will conclude in prayer.
Also for the prayer, because of Armistice Day and Veterans Day, a prayer to Saint Michael, the warrior archangel that guards all soldiers on the battlefield.
that are
Oh,
Would
in
you
okay.
like
God's
to?
light.
Would you like to lead us in that, Dolph?
Honestly, sometimes I forget the St. Michael
Yeah,
prayer when it's off
yeah.
the top of my head.
I
I'll
think
do
what
it.
we'll do. I think what we'll do is
I'll do
we'll
it.
do an Our Father, an eternal a requiem for fallen soldiers, and then the Saint Michael. All right. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
This day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Amen. Saint Michael the Archangel.
Defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls.
Amen. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord.
And may the perpetual light shine upon them.
May their
May
souls and all the souls of the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Until next week, may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.